Hi, Squad members. Welcome to a special Pop Culture SquadCast. I'm Bob Harrison, and we'll be playing for you the recording of a discussion panel that we held at Baltimore Comic-Con on October 20th, 2019. The panel was titled Exploring Webcomics with the Pros. We had a star-studded list of panelists, all of whom have been at least nominated for industry awards for their webcomic work. The panelists were Steve Conley, the creator of The Middle Age. We also had Katie Cook, who creates the webcomic Nothing Special and previously created Gronk. Dean Haspiel was there, and he has worked on many webcomics over the years. Most recently, he's working on the New Brooklyn saga, including The Red Hook, Warcry, and Starcross. Thom Zahler rounds out our panel. He's created webcomics such as Love and Capes, Warning Label, and Cupid's Arrows. Let's get started and check out this really cool discussion about comic process and delivery with this great group of creators.
Hi.
Hello.
Welcome to Exploring Webcomics with the Pros. We're going to get to who these people are if you don't know. First question for everyone here. Do you read webtoons? Online webtoons?
That's for us to answer? You mean
No.
out there? Okay.
I know your answer. Yes, you don't have to answer. Cool. Awesome. All of these people have comics that are online webtoons, and so that's the first place we can get to go through. We're going to talk about kind of a little bit of the history of webcomics and what these people are doing and how they go about their process, and that's really what we're trying to get to. So let's go in order this way. Actually, this is actually perfectly how I laid it out. So Katie, what's your introduce yourself? And
Hi.
I'll tell people what you've forgotten about.
Okay. My name is Katie Cook. I have done a lot of stuff for many people. So besides my own project, I have a comic on Webtoon called Nothing Special, which was nominated for a Ringo Award. It's all good. I know nothing but defeat in my life. This is fun. But yeah, it's my baby project. I used to do a webcomic called Gronk, a monster story, which was one of the first 50 webcomics archived by the Library of Congress.
Wow.
So that's the only thing my mom ever brags about as a librarian. But no, it's and besides that, I've also done work for Disney. I illustrate Star Wars books. I write for like Tangled Before or After. I used to write for My Little Pony for like 5 years. But Nothing Special is my baby project, so that one's mine.
Love it.
I think I'm sharing a mic or I'm speaking in stereo. I'm Steve Conley. I do a webcomic called The Middle Age. I've been doing comics for about 20. I've been doing webcomics for about 20 years, starting with one called Astounding Space Thrills back in the previous millennium. This is pretty much what I do, just my silly little webcomic.
Not silly.
My name is Thom Zahler. I do a book and have come back to Love and Capes recently, a superhero romantic comedy. I have 2 comics on Webtoon, Warning Label, and Cupid's Arrows. And along the way, I've written for the Spider-Man cartoon. I still write My Little Pony. I've written Star Trek, a bunch of stuff.
My name is Dean Haspiel, and I've worked for all the major publishers, Marvel, DC, Archie, writing, drawing, superhero comics. I've also illustrated memoir comics, Vertigo, DC, and recently in the last 3 years, I've enjoyed this really cool autonomous space where I get to write and draw something I own called The Red Hook at Webtoon.
Nice.
Thanks. You've all missed something, and I'll get to them later, but that's it.
My answer was wrong.
Wrong answer.
Do we not include our URLs?
Well, so I'm going to give Steve's right. So if you Google Steve Conley, he's not the football player. Just,
And he's not the Steve Conley.
he is not the Steve Conley. Because if you're looking on Twitter, he's the Steve Conley. All right. So Katie.
Yes.
You worked in traditional print comics. What to you is the biggest difference between print and web comics?
Right now, I really like doing the webcomic right now because it's not a page. You know, I think you can look at the first half of the first season, I'm still thinking panel, 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 panel. How am I going to put this into a book? Books. And now everything is this long, scrolling, crazy narratives that I get to play around with You know, how does this read on a tablet? How does this read on a phone? So I think my more recent work really takes advantage of just how long that can be, and what can I do to make that actual scroll part of the visual narrative for my story, which is why I have no idea how to make it a print copy. That's future Katie's problem. So no, for me, it's taking advantage of that format now of, you know, and really playing around with it, and having a blast with it.
Cool. So, Dean.
Yes.
How do you respond?
So both did have webcomics and print have.
Respond more to Katie.
Well, no, they have certain constraints.
Fight me.
And so the fight I would have is I get a little bored after a while of the reveal being at the bottom, reveal at the bottom. And comics, print comics, it's left to right, and you pull down, and you go back to the left and back to the right, and then you're turning a page. So every 2 pages could be a reveal, and you're kind of setting up little mini cliffhangers. And it's a little more frustrating, I think, with a webcomic, because it's dictated by the pull of a thumb, you know, and then you're creating the pace as the reader, you know, no matter what I do. And that's true with comics as well, you know. So after a while, what I realize is, and in my process, is that I actually am drawing it as a comic first, meaning print comic first, cutting it up for the web, which comes out first, and then a couple of years later becomes a print item, right? But I have had to forfeit inset panels and landscape panels, which is something I really enjoy, and exploiting the virtues of the real estate of the 10 by 15 page, you know, that I'm used to having grown up with, to this scroll, this toilet paper, you know, that you're literally rolling up, you know. And so after a while, for me, there's only so many times I can play with that trick, you know, and to the point where at some point, I'm going to have like the characters bouncing against the walls, maybe, because it's 800 pixels wide, you know, that you play with. So at the end of the day, with the bells and whistles of the scroll, or, you know, however a comic book works, I'm concerned with story. That's all I care about. Is there a good narrative here, you know, at the end of the day? Because you can play with the tricks, and you can exploit, you know, either version, but ultimately the takeaway is the story.
I bring that up. That's one of the first words I bring up, because I've spoken to each of these guys differently, and they all have different perspectives on how they do it. So, like Thom, if you were when you were doing, what's the difference between when you did Warning Label versus when you did Cupid's Arrows?
Oh, I didn't think Warning Label was going to work. So no, seriously, because I built it on a 2x3 grid where all the panels were square, because. And being in comics for as long as I have, everybody comes up with this great idea that's going to be the next awesome thing. And that's how Webtoon came up. Except it turned out to be this great awesome thing, and I wasn't ready for the success. But so I designed it in a 2x3 grid so I could turn it into a print book real easy, because I didn't know what else I would be able to do with it. When I did Cupid's Arrows, I still do the toilet paper scroll, but I've started taking the word balloons out of the dialogue boxes. I've started playing around a little bit more with the format, not as much as Katie, but I'm trying to take advantage of it. I do miss long panels. I miss vistas very much, but a lot of my stuff is really dialogue heavy, and that kind of works well for Webtoon. So I'm not doing. My stuff's all relationship stuff, so you don't need to do scope, you need to do intense, and it kind of fits more. And especially just in terms of content, like being a romantic comedy writer in traditional comics, nobody cares, but doing it on webcomics, I'm a left-handed reliever. So my audience is there, not place.
What did that mean? Left-handed reliever?
Left-handed reliever, it's baseball.
Oh, I was thinking something more sexual. Sorry. I don't understand. No. Sorry. You said romance comics. I mean, I didn't go to baseball. But I do think one thing
baseball either. I had the Cleveland Indians.
I do think that what's very successful on the Webtoon, the model is soap opera relationship comics, more than the grandiose, like, I don't think superheroes work that well on there, or maybe fantasy works better, but I did notice, so actually what it did do is it dictated, I just wrote the 4th season of The Red Hook that I'll be drawing later, and there's a lot more talking, actually, than action, I realize, and I think it's because it just works better on that format.
So, Steve, Can you talk a little bit about how your process works? You publish twice a week at this point. So how do you go through the process of going from idea for the strip to getting it done?
Well, mine started much more, Go Comics approached me, which is kind of old school, Calvin and Hobbes, Peanuts, that kind of horizontal format, which is shrinking and shrinking newspapers. Anyway, they approached me about putting a comic on their website, and that's what got me back into webcomics after about 15 years. And I hadn't really thought about it, but I did know that what I liked about that format, about thinking about it in terms of a strip, like a Peanuts or Calvin and Hobbes, is that the lettering's big because the comic page is shrinking in the newspapers, so their lettering is getting bigger and bigger, and I thought that'd be important for mobile devices and important for Facebook and Instagram and things like that. So there was a lot to take away from how Peanuts was 4 equal-sized boxes when it started, how just like every comic on Reddit is now, and how every horizontal swiping comic on Instagram is now. But they were thinking about fluid spaces back, 50 years ago. So that informed the shape of what I'm doing. In terms of the story I'm telling, I don't think I'm approaching my story any differently than folks here, except because I'm doing twice a week, I'm doing smaller chunks. Then I'm thinking much more in terms of discrete deliverable gags. And I think my comic strips might be more likely to be entry points, whereas when you come to webtoons, you're kind of starting on page 1 almost every time, right? But I think their system invites you to start at the beginning. Whereas my comic, the first one you might see might be episode 180.
Right.
So there's a different thought there. So that might be the only mechanical distinction.
But do you have a button that says you can start reading here, like the beginning from the beginning?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So then that's available.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
But in terms of making sure that I still think of every comic page the way they used to think of old Marvel comics, where every one is somebody's first, and it has to stand alone on that level, so that the comic strip. I don't try to repeat I don't introduce every character every page, because that would be terrible when binging it later. But I do think about new readers every time.
So, Katie, your process, and we're going to get to Dean's process, which is different than the rest of you. So how do you start with, and as you plan out, why don't you talk about your process? and there are Post-its involved in that.
There are a lot of Post-it notes involved. So I know some people, when they do a webcomic, tend to either just work off an outline, or sometimes they kind of write week to week to week. Coming from more of a traditional comics background, I write the entire script first. Like season 2 of Nothing Special is an entire ream of printer paper printed out. It's this thick, and it's in a giant binder. And then I go through and I read it again, and then I read it again, and after it goes through all of its drafts, I then sit down and I break it down chapter by chapter by chapter, and it was like, this week is going to be these panels, this week is going to be these panels, this week is going to be these panels, and I break the whole thing down, and then I pull out all of my bullet journal grid notebooks, and I thumbnail out the whole thing, and I put Post-it notes there. Here's this chapter, here's this chapter, here's this chapter, and that lets me see visually, and then I can go through and I'm like, well, now I need to change this little bit of the script because this is going to work better this way. So it's a whole big process, and it's terrifying, and I drive my husband nuts, but this is how I live my life. Like, I go to the Container Store twice a week. I'm like, what can I put in a thing? So that's, the second I start drawing the first panel, I know exactly what the last panel is. And season 2 was 53 chapters, and that was with 3 Q&As. So 50 story chapters, 3 Q&As. And I knew every single panel that I was going to draw before I even started.
Yes.
And that was 40 to 70 panels a week.
So how do you find that, and Thom, you can follow up on this, but how do you find that to be in terms of scheduling as opposed to having to get an issue of My Little Pony delivered? Like, I'm just saying, there's the deadlines that you make yourself versus somebody.
Well, Nothing Special is my project, so
Right.
It's like I have the time for it. But in the past year, I've also written issues of Tangled. I've written
Right.
some other stuff for Disney for Frozen. I illustrated a Star Wars children's book. So I have all these other projects. I have a Google Calendar where I break down my entire day into 30-minute chunks, and I say, this is what I'm working on from 9 to 9:30. This is what I'm doing from 9:30 to 10. This is what I'm doing here. And so I hit all those, and when I have a new project, I say, this is how many hours it's gonna take, and then how many chunks do I need to fill in to fit that into my schedule. If I can't fit it in, then I don't do it. But otherwise, if it's Disney, I'm like, all right, so I just take out sleep. Because I'm also a parent. I have a 5 and an 8-year-old, so they gotta be part of that half-hour chunk sometime. So yeah, it's I am a meticulous planner. Like no one wants to live with me. Like even my husband is like, it's a mixed bag. He was like, you got time for me today? No.
So, like, Thom, how do you plan it? Because I know that the way that Webtoons works, and for people who don't know, I've spoken to a bunch of you, you want to be ahead a certain amount, and then...
You want to, yes.
Well, we can talk about that. But, so how does that work? What is your normal plan on that? That you hope for?
I have my beginning and ending planned out pretty well. The middle, I'm kind of like Tom Cruise in the last Mission Impossible film. I'll figure it out! Because I get bored if I have it too structured. Like, I can do that for a few pages, but being able to work with something and make changes on the fly is more interesting to me. It helps keep me motivated with it when I'm working on other projects, because it makes it easier for me to switch between writing a Star Trek story and then drawing my comic, because if it's too planned out, it feels like I'm going through the motions, and I need something that has a little bit of improvisation in it. Warning Label started out as a 26 chapter pitch. It went 39, but part of that was because Webtoon liked it so much they said I could do more. With Cupid's Arrows, I think I added 2 chapters over the line, but there's one, Cupid's Arrows involves a 2-person hitman team with Cupids getting couples together. It's very much the Thin Man. It's a wacky couple having adventures as they're getting all these couples together. And so it's smaller arcs of different relationships. And the third one I rewrote as I went, because I said, oh, I don't like this anymore. It was still a group doing a play, but it became completely different. So I need my middle to be fuzzier. And I find, like with writing Pony or other comics, I think in 22-page chunks now. Like anytime I've done a script, I think in 30-minute increments. I think in 60-minute increments. So somehow I've been lucky enough to be able to fit everything that I need to, because my brain is just in that space. I'm sure it will blow up in my face someday, but it hasn't happened yet.
So, Dean, your process is different than the other. I know
It's a combination of what everyone said here so far. When I did Billy Dogman Activate, I kept it improvisational. I drew like 4 to 8 panels a week, left myself a little mini cliffhanger, and didn't know what was happening next until halfway through the story. I started realizing I need to figure this story out, because it's going to come to an end at a certain point. But I had little footnotes and milestones that I was, keeping on target for what I was trying to convey with that. But traditionally, how I write is I write the whole thing out first as a script, and I know what you mean about trying to find that room, that wiggle room, to be able to change it up a little bit. So when I write it, I kind of step away from it, and when I go to draw it, is when I give myself some latitude if I want to change something. Mm-hmm. But if I'm worried or I'm getting anxiety, at least I feel like I have the bones and the structure is all there. The skeleton, the basement of the story, allowing myself, if I need to veer a little bit. So yeah, I write this whole script out, like page 1, panel 1, description, dialogue, sound effects, whatever, and then I give myself the opportunity to switch it up a little bit if I need to. And that's just what keeps me comfortable. And then what I ask the editors at Webtoon is, can I get 16 chapters in the can before we launch? Right. Because I'm producing, right now in my life, I've gotten a little slower, and I produce 2 chapters a month that I deliver. And then we wait till there's 16 in the can before we launch it. And then I'm actually kind of catching up at the very end, weirdly enough, because it's 26 chapters per story. And yeah, that's how I work.
So, Steve, I have a question. We kind of talked about this as well. Do you see, again, you're all available on Webtoons. You've all self-published, self-web published. At least you put stuff other places that wasn't on Webtoons and stuff. see Webtoons as the platform? Do you see other opportunities? Where do you think that we will find a platform that is most accessible both for creators and consumers?
I like Webtoons a lot. I don't have the same relationship with Webtoons as everyone else. They're commissioned. They're sort of like I don't know. They are more like a Netflix series that has been commissioned to be created, and I'm sort of just like there's a whole section of Webtoons which is like that, where they commission really high quality, great comics, and then there's the big YouTube section where
just as high quality.
Well, they don't commission it. So it's more of the YouTube section where everybody can upload their stuff, and that's where my section, that's the stuff mine is. So it's not quite as game changing in terms of I don't get a paycheck, you know. So I think Webtoons is great in that everyone I've talked to here, and others I've talked to who have deals with Webtoons, they're really pleased with the contracts they have, and so it's a wonderful system for the creators. From the Discover side, which is the YouTube submission side, it's good. It depends on the genre of your work. There's certain genres we talk about that work, and I think there are probably. So in terms of whether Webtoons is game changing, I don't know. I have a lot of readers there. I wouldn't want to give up Tapas and Go Comics and my own website or Graphite, places like that. Like that. Is that the their card?
So one of the questions. So in terms of actual drawing process, Dean, you still use a more traditional thing.
Look at me.
Right?
I can't draw plastic on plastic. I don't know how to do that. Like, I do color and letter digitally, but I still draw pen and paper on, pencil, blue pencil, eraser, micron pen or jet pen and brush on paper and scan it in, and I just prefer to draw that way. That's how I was weaned on it, and a lot of my studio mates, they have all these big tablets and Cintiqs and whatnot, and I'm just gobsmacked as I look at it. Like I still have to go buy supplies and I have to stack of paper, but that's how I know comics. Maybe someday I'll switch over. I don't know. And I see a lot of people undoing a lot, and I can't undo because I just committed to it. So
is that the Control X that we're talking about?
Well, that's cut.
So how about your process? Where do you go? How do you?
I'm mostly digital at this point.
Right.
I mean, I still make sure that I know how to do stuff by hand, especially like working on My Little Pony. When I do a cover, I know I can sell an original, so I have to make an original to sell. And when you're doing comic book conventions like this, people come up for commissions, and they need to be able to still do that. But I like being able to reuse backgrounds, I like being able to zoom in, I like being able to undo. So when I'm all digital. I work on a Cintiq or I work on an iPad. My iPad I can't get finished. Like the Cintiq I can make it look like my ink line, like I drew it by hand. The iPad I can't, so it's like an 80% machine. I'll do a lot of work on the road and then export it to my Cintiq and finish things off there. And the whole process is just blurred, where I used to do pencils, or light pencils, dark pencils, inks, but now my pencils are my inks because I'm just drawing with the same pen tip. And if I draw something that looks right, I can pull it up and make it the finished piece and keep the stuff I want, and it's made me so much faster. I'm doing the new run of Love and Capes digitally, and I used to be able to do a page a day, and now I can do 4 pages a day. Also, I drink a lot of coffee.
So, Katie, what do you find in terms of feedback that you get, and how does besides Twitter, which you don't have right now, but the Webtoons format where you're getting feedback, how does that work?
It's been amazing.
Does it change anything about how you perceive what you're doing?
Well, I love the comment section of Webtoon because it's all very supportive teenagers for the most part. It's like, finally, sometime in my life, I get a teenager saying something nice.
Actually, so just this, I need to take this. Can you tell the story of the grocery line? Please, people need to hear it.
I have on my jacket, if you read my comic, it has a dead radish in it.
We love radish.
And so I have a little pin on my coat that says, "Have you met my guardian vegetable?" And I was just like, Kroger. Teenage girl who's just scanning my groceries. She's not even old enough to check out the wine at this point. So it's like she has to call a manager over. And she went, "I read that comic." And it was like, "I'm about to make your day." And she was like, "What?" And I was like, "I write and draw that." And like we just like freaked out at each other for like 7 minutes.
You're Katie Can Draw.
I am Katie Can Draw. And she was like, "Oh my God." We got a selfie. She put it on Instagram. It was great.
So that type of first-hand connection, plus what you get on how does that work?
It's amazing. I mean, I get all of these amazing comments. I get all of this interaction on Twitter and Instagram. I get fan art. I get so much fan art. It's so cute. It's like I get tagged in something every few days of someone that's drawn one of the characters. I have a stack of radishes that people drew me this weekend. I have a whole wall in my office that I tell people is my award shelf because it's all Gronk and radish fan art. And it's like, this is what people have been making me for years. And it's so fulfilling for me to be like, oh my God, people like the thing that I make enough to do the thing. It's way better than when I have a 5-year-old going, "You suck at writing Rainbow Dash." So, which I've gotten. Oh no.
So, to kind of bring something Dean talked about earlier, and Steve, you can start with this one. All of you and all of your more current work, which is all vastly different. You should be reading all these people's work because there's something for everyone in there. But there's some degree of heroic questing action that happens, but it's also with grounded emotional arcs and how that works. And where do you find the right mix for that?
Okay, suits. I was hoping for a technical.
Don't tell them. Don't tell them.
Where do I find them? Yeah,
Where do we go
there's
from
a webpage, you can download these.
Maledictus stabbing somebody in the back versus the cute little baby dragons?
Okay. I started the story because I'm a middle-aged dude, and it's a middle-aged adventure, and it was just really silly and dumb. And so basically it was kind of write what you know. A long time I was trying to write what I like, which is not the same. I try and tell personal stories in a filter that doesn't make it about me, because I think, I feel like these drawings and these characters are way more palatable than I am personally. It was trying to tell personal stories through a lens that could make it funny. That's what it came down to. I don't think it was more complicated than that. And then if I have 8 or 9 profound things to say in total, that I would find a place to put them somewhere in the story.
Cool. So Thom, where do you go? Because again, the work that you do that is your own. There's a lot of rom-com to it, but there's definitely intense action in certain ways, especially about the cases. So.
Yeah, the action stuff tends to bore me a little more because I'm not good at it. So when I did Love and Capes, I did the thing I wanted to read, but mostly I wanted to write banter because I really like doing that. And I wanted to write all the in-between moments that you see in another comic book. Some of that is just because it's interesting to me, and some of that is because I kind of believe in the hit 'em where they ain't theory of marketing. Like if you want to read a really good superhero book, DC and Marvel publish a bunch of them. They also publish a lot of them. But anyway, they publish a bunch of them. But none of them are really doing characters in a successful relationship. So if you're looking for that, I'm right there. There's me. And you bond with your fan base differently, and that's kind of become what I've known for. So I steal from people I know. I steal from me. I just write the stuff that makes sense to me, or things I want to explore. Like, what if you led with all your best or led with all your worst qualities, which is warning label. I wanted the idea of a couple that was working together that started figuring out that they're supposed to be together when they can't. That's Cupid's arrows. And some of that was my editor changing it, because in the original pitch they were already together. It was very much Nick and Nora, and we actually started earlier, and I think that was much more interesting. But I just like writing that stuff, and I like writing Aaron Sorkin dialogue as much as you can in comics, because you can't use as many words. Well, you can, but then you're biased. And you have to visualize how much room the dialogue is taking up on the page and figure out how to break it into chunks so that people want to read it and they don't just go, oh my god, it's an exposition dump. You try to keep it friendly and funny, and like that's all the stuff that's interesting me, is figuring out how to tell human stories with that level of humor and dialogue.
So Dean, you are definitely cosmic with what you're doing right now, and heroic, but
It's just autobiography.
yeah. So there's a lot of the Red Hook saga that is taking place between superheroes, but it's really nothing about them being superheroes.
Right. I love genre. I love superheroes. I love crime. I love science fiction. But they all have their trappings. And I think as I've gotten older and better as a cartoonist, I hope, at the end of the day, how we respond to each other is through vulnerability, you know? And, you know, we spend a lot of time, spend a lot of time alone. And so I try to use these comics not only to express myself, but to connect and to belong.
So let's go full circle. So where are you? Like, I mean, there's, the mother tree killing train.
Oh, everybody that's like, your comic is so wholesome. It's like, she kills her mom. But no, it's mine comes from a place of, I wanted to create a comic that I wish I had when I was a teenage girl. So I wrote, this YA magical adventure with these teenagers and a dead radish, and in the first season, this total dickhead of a demon prince who gets way better in the second season.
Yes.
Because I like growth,
Yes.
and I wanted healthy relationships. I took out every single trope that I hated as a teenager. I hate love triangles. I hate this. I hate the will they or won't they. I'm just gonna get rid of all that, and I'm gonna write the thing I wanna read.
Okay. Was that intentional? Did you think about that?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want.
Yeah, I was like, I don't want this.
They're just gonna be together. And
Yeah, and then actually season 3 is taking every other relationship trope that I hate, and I'm just gonna completely throw them in there as like, no, I hate this. Callie's gonna be like, nope. So yeah, it's really me. Like I said, it's the story I wanted. Like all the frustrations, everything I hated as a 14-year-old, I'm just going to get rid of it.
It's a hate comic.
Yeah, it is. It's very much a hate comic. And it's funny because the original pitch for Nothing Special is something that I had shown off before Thom at Webtoon was like, do whatever you want, man. And I showed this to publishers, and they were like,
But to Tom's credit, Tom Aker we're talking about,
So let's do
he
that.
believes
Yeah.
in the people he curates. And
Yeah.
he's like, do it,
Yeah,
Go
it's-
for it. I trust in your sensibilities, and here's a playground.
Yep.
And do your thing.
Yeah, because the original pitch for Nothing Special, 2 publishing houses, which shall remain nameless, that are major publishers, said, what'll make this sell? Get rid of the radish and make the boy the main character. It's like, and Webtoon is the company that went, oh my God, no, don't do that. Put more of the radish in.
Right.
So yeah, but that was the feedback I got from 2 major publishers was make the boy the main character, make the girl a simpering lady, which is why Declan is the girl. It's actually one of my favorite interactions at a con. I was talking to Terry Moore, and he was talking to me about my comic, and he was talking about, I don't know, Declan's kind of useless. Oh my God, he's the girl! And it was like, you caught that, did you?
So, let's think about it. I've heard Jamal Igle say this, and I want your guys' opinion on it. His theory for the future of comics is that there won't be individual monthly floppies. Those will all be digitally available, and we will only have collected editions. What is your opinion on? Do you think that's where we're going? Are we going to only be reading, episodes on our devices, or?
That's how the youth
Sure.
like does content now. It's like I have kids. It's like I can put a book in front of them. I can put a trade in front of them, and that's fine. But other than that, I mean, my 8-year-old reads everything on her iPad.
As someone who's got the material not just on Webtoons, but in other places, and on my own website, I can see the statistics, and it's a ton of mobile tablet traffic. I mean, it's not, so the landscape's kind of going away, they're just the formats. I mean, it's nice to have it, I miss panoramas, I miss those ones, and maybe tablets can have it, they rotate so like tablets and Webtoons really are vertical.
Do you remember though, before the vertical scroll, it was the landscape scroll for a while. You went left to right.
Well, and
right.
it was half pages because your monitor looked like this.
Right.
So everybody was taking a comic book page that looked like this. It's going to go great on a podcast. A page that was like this and cut it in half so that you had a top and a bottom that became one page when you printed it, 2 pages when you put it online.
But I do think the ultimate size that I had, if you put a gun to my head, is the square. You know, I started off with squares with Billy Dogma and Activate because we did think, you know, these are going to be on phones at some point. And that's when we had the flip phone, and it was a square, basically. Yeah. Now we have the page size, which is the small, you know, the phone. But I do think ultimately that might be the best way to convey a whole bunch of kinds of comics. You know, maybe not the epic, sweeping vistas. You know, that's different. But I do think ultimately, I think what's happening with the major publishers is they're still trying to honor the brick and mortar store by coming out with these monthly things that, you know, for $4 or $5 now, which is just basically a couple of scenes of a graphic novel every month, waiting for the trade. And I do think, put it online first if you want to serialize it, collect it in print or online, you know, digitally. And I think the other way that would be a way to make money is special editions with, you know, bells and whistles or added attractions or behind the scenes or whatever. Like, was it a Radiohead or somebody that, here's an album for free or pay what you want. But then for $50, you can get the vinyl, the this, the that, you know, someone's underwear, I mean, whatever that comes with it, you know? So that's another way to create revenue, you know? I remember when webcomics first came out, and I've never done this myself, but I remember a lot of merchandising. Like, you got the webcomic for free, but buy the shirt or buy the this or that. So I don't know how that's working today, but I do know there's a way to like figure that out.
And I don't think there's any one solution that's going to come, because for as much as like in TV, people think that 13-episode Netflix series are the things to do, that there's still network television and there's still a reason for that. The percentages are going to change. I can see a lot less floppy comics. I could see part of comics' problems is, like Dean says, they are writing for the trade, and everything is this very decompressed storytelling, where they think they're doing an episode of a TV show, but they're doing an act of a TV show, and it feels very unsatisfying. Where if you have somebody who knows what they're doing, like when Dwayne McDuffie wrote Fantastic Four, his individual issues felt like stories. Like there was a beginning, middle, and end, and I remember complimenting him on it. And I'm like, how are you doing it? And he's like, I can just make more stuff up. Like I don't have to pad out an idea for 6 issues, I can just make more stuff up. So like I can see a world where there are fewer floppy comics, but they're better floppy comics. And like the stuff we do on Webtoons, roughly speaking, is 5-6 pages of a comic book. That's a different pace, that's a different chapter than a 22-inch book. And there's stuff I'll read on my phone, but I get Back Issue Magazine, because I'm addicted to finding the stories of the 80s and 90s in comics, and I read that on my iPad because it's cheaper than getting the print version, but the iPad is the format that works with that. So the same way that like not everything I watch is a giant movie screen for watching the Avengers, it depends what I want to watch, how I want to experience it, and there's no reason I have to pick any one.
And to speak to the 5-page increment per chapter, like format, let's say, I remember I was struggling with that. Like, what does that look like? What is 5 pages of comics? How is that a chapter? And, you know, and I discovered when Kirby came back to Marvel, after he left Marvel, went to DC, then went back to Marvel, and he worked on Captain America, I noticed every 5 pages was a splash page. And that might have been just him arriving at a new way of telling, showing the story. But I remember feeling it felt satisfying. And then there was a big, close-up of Captain America or some moment, and then it would say chapter 2, and then chapter 3, and he did that in the comic. So I started using that as a way to inspire me to think that way.
Yeah, and I think you want to write your medium, So when they did Buffy comics and Dark Horse, the first ones that came down the pike all felt like somebody's rejected spec script. So it was a lot of the group being funny in the library, which is great when you have actors delivering lines with chemistry and kind of sits on the page no matter how well you letter it. And then when Joss Whedon did the Angel miniseries, he's like, well, I'm going to put in a giant 30-foot monster because I can't afford that on my Fox budget. And took advantage of what you can do in comics that you can't do in print. And like knowing what you can do differently in every form that you have makes it a better thing.
So to follow up on something that you said for you, Steve, the square. So, and this is
How you get all your sales.
well, so your comic is, you present it in multiple formats. And when you put it on Webtoons, it is in a vertical scroll, but in other formats, it's in one. What do you personally feel about how do you think it's perceived differently?
Well, like what Dean said, having a flexible container for the material helps a lot. Like Charles Schultz did it with Peanuts, so I think he was years ahead of his time. I don't know, it's everyone's doing it when they're collecting the book in print, or if they're going to collect it in print.
Book.
But I'm mostly doing it to monetize it or to make it more comfortable for whatever audience. To me, it's not that different than an audiobook version of a text. Doing it whether the comic strip scrolls vertically or horizontally or as a square, and it's on Facebook or Instagram or wherever they're going to see it. It doesn't really matter to me. I just want to make sure it's as comfortable as possible on the platform that they're looking at it. So, or one that's not invented some floating comic sphere. But to me, it's all about. To me, it was largely about the format. Ended up being like, well, what can I do to make money? And books at the end, and Kickstarters, and Patreon, things like that are how I fund doing a comic that no publisher in their right mind would probably publish. Or it's been rejected. So I mean, I know full well that no one wants to publish this, at least not yet. So I'll do it myself. And I'm doing this in webcomics almost out of necessity. And also because I really want to do this dumb thing, and no one else wants me to do this dumb thing, or at least my readers like me doing this dumb thing, but I don't think I could convince anybody who has to sell this dumb thing that they would want to do this dumb thing.
Sure.
So she hates her comics. Your comics are dumb. What's going on here?
Mine are awesome.
I just think if I don't know, it's like a person who sells a certain product. If you tell them, okay, this week you're a car salesman, this week you're selling produce, they would feel like they don't know what they're doing. And so if they get something that they're not used to selling, they don't know how to sell it, they don't have a pre-existing channel with which to sell it.
So when I'm out hanging out socially, like at a bar or something like that, and I'm meeting someone after a while, they're like, well, what do you do? I started saying this thing that I realize is creepy when I say it, but I'm like,
left-handed reliever.
Left-handed reliever. I was like, my comic is in your pocket right now.
I love it.
And it is. It literally, give it a minute, right? Like log on, download Webtoon, and there's a free, my comic's in your pocket right now. And they're like, what are you talking about? And I explain it, so. No, and it is, but at the end of the day, I'm an old print guy, and I like to hold this in my hand more than the phone, because we're on our phone for everything now, right? So it's like, I'll get to comics maybe, it's a camera before it's a phone, before you're talking on it. And then people don't even like to talk on phones, and there's texting, and my fingers are not in text. Anyway.
So do you think that the availability of the fact that it is in your hands, like when you're going to bed, that your phone is in your hands, do you think that is beneficial to the format? You don't have to actually go to the store to bid the comic book, you're able to go to the mailbox to get it if you've got that subscription. Just the fact that it's right there, do you think that is a factor?
Yeah, it's especially on Webtoon, most of the readership on Webtoon, it's not like, last year they were like it was 5 million, and in New York they're like, no, it's 10 million US subscribers. That's batshit crazy, by the way. And almost all of them are younger, and like over half are female. So, because women don't read comics. But I mean, think of that younger audience, that again, how they, enjoy content. It's through tablet, through phone. I'm old. I don't even let my phone in my bedroom, my tablet. It's all like, because otherwise I'm not going to go to bed. So
well, listen,
I'm not the audience for that.
If I don't that is my webtoons time. Is when I'm in bed, ready, trying to go to sleep. Then I'll just like, okay, now I'm going to catch up to my special.
This will get me to sleep.
I'm 3 weeks behind on you know.
That's when I read a book.
I'll say this though, and I know you're about to say it, but there is interesting, but I don't like binge culture, but I do realize certain, at least on Webtoons, certain comics I think work better as a binge read. You know, it's like people are waiting for the whole thing because they get frustrated by, oh, you just give me, and I get those kind of comments like, that's all there is this week? Was like, you make a comic, you know? Like,
Whenever anybody comments, it was short.
Yes.
It's like, I put out 70 panels this week. F you, 12-year-old. It's like, you do it. My husband won't let me do that. Like, he's sitting there like deleting stuff on my Twitter account. He's like, stop it, don't do that, don't post that.
Do you find people, Thom, that binge through things on your site? Do you like?
I found them after the fact because once it goes up, people will binge it. But I don't know. I haven't run into a lot of people who've waited. I've run into people who haven't started it, but usually if they start, if it's all there, they go through it. Yeah, and I just like discoverability. Like, I'm old enough that comics used to be sold at convenience stores, and like they were always there. And there was a point where my aunt, because her grandson was starting to read, and she says, and this was like 5-6 years ago, they still make Batman comics? And I'm like, you know what I do for a living. Like, they still make comics, but you can't find them. And with everything being on, things being on phones, it becomes another point of entry. I want it to be frictionless. I don't want it to be hard to find comics. I want you to find them in as many places as you can so you get addicted quickly. And then you start escalating and buying hardcover trade paperback versions of stuff I do or whatever.
And what's interesting is that I've been selling a lot of my stuff on Amazon through their print on demand and through their ebook systems. And it's really interesting is that comics are in a lot of ways like an audiobook to people who read traditional prose. It's like a different format that they're not. There's a barrier to entry. So as soon as you can break that down at all, it's super helpful for all comics.
All right, we have 12 minutes. So do we want to have any questions in the audience? All right.
Steve, you talked about your comic is on other platforms and your own website. How do the traffic stats compare between the different platforms?
It's minuscule compared to the promoted stuff on Webtoons. They're on the front pages for weeks. It gets promotions through emails. I get an update, and not only that, the subscribers on Webtoons will get like updates and alerts on your phone. Hey, this new episode is awesome. So it's tiny compared to that, but it's sizable compared to. There's a lot more people doing it now because Webtoons has a Discover section, and they're kind of all in Discover, and they're all fighting for attention down there too. They're quite clear about, at least on the Discover side, how many subscribers there are and how many likes there are and things like that. So you can get a sense with this particular genre that you might be interested in working in, what's working now and what's not necessarily. But on my old side, things like Reddit still send a ton of traffic my way, and social media still sends a ton. My primary focus is on email and Patreon. I think those are the more, basically direct contact to the reader, and trying to foster that as best I can is still bulletproof, because if Webtoons or Topless goes away tomorrow, I want to maintain, or YouTube, or I don't know, Facebook goes away tomorrow, I want to still maintain those connections in some way. So I've got a 5-year plan, and hopefully not beholden to anybody the way the direct market basically held my dad's for 10 years.
Sorry, you had a question?
Yeah.
You can speak loud as possible. Great.
Okay. My question is, how do you get back into doing webcomics? About 10, 12 years ago, I did a webcomic for about a year, and it wasn't tedious. It just didn't work out. So I kind of left and went back to doing normal stuff. And for the last couple of years, I've been reading since I stopped my own webcomic. But I've been reading a lot of webcomics and things like that. And I feel like I want to give it a try, and I just have no idea how to get back into it, because it literally
Just
feels
make the thing and
more
post
intimidating.
the thing. Make it and post it. That's, it's.
But I think I think, if I may, what wasn't working for you? The process, the expectation, what?
Actually, it was a combination of things. It was the expectation I was putting on myself because I had a couple of peers that were getting bigger and better. And
Peers getting bigger and better.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, mainly they were getting more readers,
Sure.
and things of that nature.
So you felt a competition of sorts.
I did, and I put the pressure on myself, but it was also like I kept asking myself, what wasn't I doing? Because I was doing something a little more niche, which was at the
That's
time
fair. That's you.
was a bit more slice of life-ish. And
Right.
doing these bigger, like superhero-ish sci-fi things.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I'd like to do it, but I'd like to try something.
No, you were
different.
doing what you wanted to do. You can't predict any kind of success. And the thing I always tell people is, well, Howard Chaykin calls comics a calling, which I think he's right. There are people who think of it as a business and like, oh, it's cool to do comics, and then after a while they're like, well, I'm not getting what I want out of it. I'm not getting paid or whatever. And you have to do it because you have to do it. You know, I always say, show up to your own party, because if you're not showing up, nobody else will. So commitment, regularity, and you know, you may get hear crickets for a while before somebody, you know, but at the end of the day, you should be doing it for you, not for a share, a like, a heart, or whatever. I mean, those are great, but you have to do it because you need to do it, you know? So maybe you tried, you put it down, you went and got a normal job, you said? What's that again?
Well, it was something
put on
where
that
I had a normal job. I was in retail,
Right.
but it was something where it was like, okay, 9 to 5. Hey, there's extra hours. No thanks, I got things to do. I gotta go home and draw.
Right.
And I was doing uploads and things like that. But then it was like part of the mentality was like, if I do this long enough, maybe I'll get big enough where I don't have to work a steady job.
Right, of course, you want to get to the point where you're making a living at it,
Yeah,
right? I get it.
But the pressure that I put on myself, the expectation, things like that, I got frustrated. So then, you know, I just decided, like I did with my parents told me when I was little, if something frustrates you and something doesn't work out for whatever reason, it's okay to walk away.
Absolutely.
So I walked away and I took up another passion, which was automotive. And I'm in a position now where, okay, bills are paid, everything's fine and dandy. Even though I stopped doing webcomics, I never stopped drawing for myself. I never stopped drawing comics, I never stopped writing, I never stopped doing. But I never, you know, and I was telling my own story, so it was happy because I have a stack of stuff from everything I've drawn. But now it's like, you know what, maybe I feel like sharing. Maybe I feel like I have something that I want to do no matter what, because it's.
Well, I'll say this as just a quick note: is if people are going to put up pictures of their lunch to share, you might as well put up your comics.
If I can and this kind of heads to your question, but it kind of goes to other places as well. So there's an example. There's a writer cartoonist named Kate Leff who has done a lot of things. She's written some stuff and it's been published, but she decided to start doing this small little 4-panel comic, and she just started putting it on her Instagram feed, and it's beautiful and cute and adorable. And when I saw her recently, I'm like, why is this just there, you know? And I don't know that she's probably discovered right now. I'm looking, but she when putting it on the webtoon. So just put it out there, like you said. If people posting their lunch, go to your Instagram feed, put it out there. People will see it. It gets there, and just do it because you're doing it.
Well, one of these is that Dan Savage talks about relationships, like everyone fails until one doesn't, and that's very similar to webcomics. So if you want to try something different, I would also maybe recommend having a Patreon page, because even if you have one person, maybe even $1, it gives you a very good excuse with family and friends. I gotta work, I gotta earn this $1 somehow. You know, you don't tell them the total that you're earning, but it's one of those things people will understand. I gotta get this done.
Self-imposed deadlines. Absolutely. I would get nothing done if it wasn't attached to a clock.
Yeah. And I recommend lowering your expectations. And what I mean by that is, when I did, the first book I did was called Raider, and it was going to be my 13-volume magnum opus, and it lasted 3 trades and went out. And when I did Love and Capes, I said I'm going to do 1 issue. And if that goes well, maybe I'll do another. And then it became, okay, I'll do 6 and 6 and 6. And it's very much that one foot in front of the other. When I took humor class at Hubert School, and the thing my teacher said that really broke through to me is he said, stop trying to get people to laugh. Just try to get them to smile. Like, break it down into little bite-sized chunks. Don't try to always hit a home run. Sometimes it's good to just get on base.
Does anybody have any other questions? Go ahead.
How would you guys feel about like having someone else write for your characters, like stories for your characters? Because like eventually I do want to write for webcomics, and so do my friends. And eventually we had the idea of like, hey, if you get your webcomic going, maybe I can write a story for your characters. You can write a story for mine. Would you guys like try to get a collaboration going, or like have any one of your people you know, or try to have have them write for your stories for your characters?
For mine, I am very protective of my fictional children. I've seen fan fiction that I do not approve of.
Sorry.
Oh,
That's awesome.
Teenagers are weird. So for me, with this current project, I love seeing the fan art, but if it were an official story in a capacity, I would have such creative control over it, because it's like, Lasser wouldn't do that. Callie wouldn't do that. Nope.
Eating a salad.
Radish would not approve. But it's the first project like that where I have been so overprotective of these characters that are not real.
Well, you have the experience of writing other people's characters.
I do a lot of licensed work. You know, I write for Disney. I've written for My Little Pony. I've written for Marvel. I'm doing some stuff for Star Wars, and usually I have to play in someone else's sandbox, and like, this is my sandbox, and I'm like, this is my bucket, this is my shovel, and I don't want anybody else in it.
Right. What do you think?
It depends on the thing that I'm writing. I guess the thing I keep harping on is that there's nothing is ever just one thing. Where, like Love and Capes, I'm very protective of those characters, and I don't think I would want anyone else to write it unless there was a super huge check involved to make the TV show. But there's other stuff that I've written that come to me and said, oh, well, we're thinking about doing this if we did the TV show. I'm like, yeah, sure. Like, it's a cool idea. There's some things I care very much about, and there's some things that are a little more commercial I'm more open to. So if it's the right project, I collaborate with people on. And like Katie, I've written licensed stuff too, and you learn that you have to respect the characters and put the toys all back where you found them. You know, you can't, no matter what people think, it's great to give them the illusion that you can do things, but there's a lot of things you can't do. I had one fan on Twitter who was asking me if I was going to kill off Twilight Sparkle in the comics.
Yes.
And like, there's a certain part where you don't want to engage with a certain level of crazy, because I'm like, yeah, they're going to let me do that in the comic and not in the TV show. No, sure, but you'll have to buy the issue and find out.
Everyone in Ponyville dies.
I just wonder where that question comes from. Like, are you opposed to sharing with your friends in this?
Oh no, I just think it'd just be interesting. If like when I get a comic series going, like I want to see where how my friends would play in my sandbox.
So I can speak to that because the Red Hook is part of this universe I co-created called New Brooklyn, where I created it and then I invited other writers into it, and then there was the Purple Heart and the Brooklynite, and so I knew the Red Hook was going to make cameos in these other comics. So I guess what we did for each other was to say, this is how we're going to use your character in that story, and it's what, do you want to write the dialogue? Meaning, do I want to write whatever the Red Hook says in that comic? No, you can take a crack at it. So the way I kind of see it is that it's like a showrunner. Do you know what a showrunner is for television?
Yes.
So they kind of create the series, and they're the one that everyone is writing the story. There's an outline put out there, and then everyone goes takes a crack at an episode or something, and then it ultimately is kind of rewritten and shaped by the showrunner. That's the voice, the vision, the ultimate yes or no. And so maybe you can act as a showrunner with your buddies, and vice versa. Like if they create characters and you want to use one of theirs and yours, you run it by them in that kind of relationship. That's honoring each other.
So we're just about out of time. So why don't we go where you guys are, where you can find them, and where are you?
I'm at booth 920.
Okay.
I'm at booth 1220 and middleagecomic.com.
I'm 1120, right behind Steve in his shadow, and I'm at Thom Zahler on Twitter and Instagram.
I'm in your pocket right now.
And so Pop Culture Squad has a little bit of a presence at booth 118. We have some cards here, and there's some stickers and pins that you can find there. You can find us on popculturesquad.com. We have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram accounts that match all of that. Please like and follow, and thank you all so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for spending some time with us. I can't thank the panelists enough. Be sure to check out their work on Line Webtoon or other places. They're all great follows on Twitter and Instagram, so check them out. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Pop Culture Squad on all our social media platforms and the website itself. Thanks again, and we'll see you later.